Welcome to the Spy Collection Digital Edition, where we are looking at spy artifacts that only exist in digital format. I'm Anastasios, and in this episode we'll go through the complete slide deck from one of Edward Snowden's leaked files. This one. It's coming from Britain's primary SIGINT agency, the GCHQ, from the early 2010s, and was likely from a briefing between GCHQ and NSA on how they can, or how they already use cyberspace to have effects in the real world. Or, as GCHQ called it back then, full-spectrum cyber effects, SIGINT development as an enabler for GCHQ's effects mission. We have reconstructed the slide deck to be easier to present in this video. As you can see, before it was leaked, it was classified as top secret with strap 1 level. To protect the individuals that did this, Snowden had redacted their names, leaving only the GCHQ departments involved. It was the Joint Research Intelligence Group, a GCHQ unit that its mission was to use unconventional SIGINT means to destroy, deny, degrade, and disrupt adversaries by covert online influence operations, cyber espionage, and so on. Actually, it was JTRIG that was heavily referring to their operations as effects back then. SIGDEV Effects likely stands for SIGINT Development Effects, and the tiny letters under the emblem said Intelligence Defense Effects. Worth noting here that in SIGINT, the domain of SIGDEV or SIGINT Development refers to creating or developing new capabilities or enhancing existing ones. For example, exploiting a new type of signal or adding a new disruption vector to an existing system. So this presentation was how those two GCHQ units developed those new cyber capabilities to have real-world impact through the cyber domain. As mentioned, effects in GCHQ spy lingo mean the ability to destroy, deny, degrade, disrupt, deceive, or protect an asset. And those two units were focusing on how to achieve effects using CNA and CNIO. Briefly, CNA refers to the first 4 Ds, destroy, deny, degrade, and disrupt, and is primarily technically, as in infrastructure-level cyber attacks. CNIO is what most people know today as disinformation or influence operations, which could also be used to deceive, but to disrupt as well. For more details, check our Tradecraft Sunday episode 7, where we cover this in more detail. So effects in GCHQ means having an impact in the real world, and it was mainly performed by JTRIG and CNE. In around 2010, this was about 5% of all GCHQ operations, but we can assume that this number has grown significantly since then. GCHQ was using that across all target types, meaning from terrorists to politicians, other spy agencies, and anything else in between. And since it was very new back then, it had continuous innovation of new tools and techniques. So how do you conduct cyber-enabled information operations? Using primarily social media platforms to develop and covertly distribute propaganda, create and promote fake stories to influence people, mass message people through email, SMS, private messages, and so on to spread your information, use advertisement networks or connections to media outlets to promote your message so that it can reach the specific target audience, publish stories that have no official connection to British government to make the entire story appear more legitimate, that is coming from multiple different sources. And to do many of those tasks, you also need many fake profiles, which means you need to have a way to do proper online alias development. Lastly, but equally importantly, use psychologists to study your target audience and identify what's the best strategy to achieve your effects through those CNIOs. Since we briefly covered what CNIO meant for GCHQ at the time, now let's look at CNA, meaning attacking the infrastructure of a target through cyber means. In this slide, we'll start with a photo that GCHQ used, which tells a story that isn't that widely known. This photo came from the Associated Press, and it was described as an image of Mir Hossein Mossavi is seen, lower left, fixed to a desk with a smashed computer monitor in a room in a Tehran University dormitory after it was attacked by militia forces during riots in Tehran, Iran, in the early hours of Monday, June 15, 2009. That was one of the many outcomes of the 2009 Iranian presidential election. And as cybersecurity researchers discovered in 2016, GCHQ's JTRIG had used some of its capabilities to interfere with the Iranian election and promote the protests. Actually, as we can read in this Snowden leaked file related to this, the Iran team currently aims to achieve counter-proliferation by discrediting the Iranian leadership and its nuclear program, delaying and disrupting access to materials used in the nuclear program, conducting online humint, and counter-censorship. Here is one of the many fake profiles used and the stories it was promoting about that. Actually, if you'd like us to do a deep dive into that covert online operation of GCHQ's JTRIG, please let us know in the comments below. In addition, several stories of the time used this exact photo talking about how Iran was blocking people from accessing the internet during those protests. But here we see a different perspective, that GCHQ JTRIG could create denial of service to phones, emails, computers and faxes using CNA that will work in tandem with the above covert influence operations to create panic and chaos, or in a more professional way, disruption. We do not know if JTRIG was behind the internet and telephone outages across Iran in June of 2009, but the fact that they did the CNIOs to interfere with the Iranian presidential election, they used this specific photograph, and the way this slide describes it makes it a likely scenario. Next, we have the range of effects, ranging from targeting an individual or enterprise all the way to targeting entire countries. As we see, it starts by blocking their access to Wi-Fi, which is very trivial even for people with limited technical expertise, or making their phones unusable by bombarding them with non-stop fake calls or messages. Next is sending messages that appear to be coming from a legitimate source, but actually are fake. Those can be used for anything to discredit someone, make it look like they said something that they didn't, or even as an infiltration vector by asking the recipient to install a software that's actually a spyware, or give access to sensitive information. Hotels play a crucial role in the spy world, from officials traveling to clandestine meetings or anything else in between. Lots of shady activities take place all the time in hotels across the world, so attacking them can significantly complicate the logistics of a target. We already talked about psychological operations using social media, phones, emails, and so on. And now we get to a more serious escalation level where GCHQ could target the maritime domain to disrupt all its cyber-enabled functions, forcing ships to rely on pen and paper operations, or simply halt operations. Although not related to GCHQ, we have seen the impact when a Russian intelligence operation targeting Ukraine accidentally also hit Maersk in 2017. This resulted in a global crisis on the shipping space and hundreds of millions of US dollars lost. And think about it, it wasn't even intended for Maersk in the first place. Okay, but what worse could GCHQ do with this new capability? Changing internet routing, meaning affecting entire countries or large parts of them through changes in the global internet routing. Again, if you are interested, let us know and we'll do a dedicated episode on this. That's actually way more common than most people think today. And of course, the ultimate escalation is targeting critical infrastructure, which, again, we've seen happen again and again over the last decade. That level of escalation is equivalent to an act of war by many experts. And now that we covered the general topics, let's dive into some specific capabilities. Two such programs of GCHQ at the time were the infinite curvature and the mountain slope. First, the infinite curvature was a software that GCHQ had developed, which was processing data from the agency's Salamanca database. That database was holding telephony-related metadata, like numbers, who they belong to, who called them, and so on. And it was also having logic for phone codes, prefixes, and was using open source to get equivalent information for faxes. All of that in the United States are typically referred to as DNR, or dialed number recognition, and infinite curvature was able to send messages to target groups that GCHQ operators defined in this tool. But apart from that, we have what the US intelligence community calls DNI, or Digital Network Intelligence. Those are equivalent things for the digital space. For this, GCHQ had developed the Mountain Slope program, which was, at the time, focusing only on email. It was getting radius authentication and IP geolocation data and turning them into target detection identifiers, or TDIs. Once again, if you'd like us to do a deep dive on TDIs, please let us know in the comments below. So using infinite curvature and mountain slope, GCHQ JTRIG was able to send messages across the full spectrum of communications. Previously we talked about hotels and their importance to spies. Here we have another JTRIG program, the ROYAL CONCIERGE, a SIGINT-driven hotel reservation type of service. The photo they selected was a public domain photograph of Rue de la Croix d'Or in Geneva, Switzerland, from September 2005. It's well known that Switzerland has been a hotbed of espionage for decades now, but we were unable to identify why they selected this specific photo for this slide. If you do know, please let us know. So if you ever booked a hotel online, then you probably received some confirmation email that looked like this. And as we've demonstrated in previous videos, both GCHQ and NSA were siphoning enormous amounts of internet traffic globally and then sorting it out in different databases. So anytime GCHQ was seeing emails in that internet traffic, it was also sending them to Royal Concierge for processing, and as they said, Royal Concierge exploits these messages and sends out daily alerts to analysts working on governmental hard targets. If a SIGINT analyst in GCHQ had configured the details of a specific target and they happened to receive such a hotel reservation, GCHQ would alert one of their SIGINT analysts to look into it. And what were those SIGINT analysts looking at? What hotel are they visiting? Is it SIGINT friendly, meaning can they hack it and spy on its guest communications? Or, an enabler for effects, can we influence the hotel choice? Can we cancel their visit? This way they can force their target to stay in a hotel where they have the advantage. Two of the most common examples of what they were able to do with this is enable humint, meaning have someone approach their target and elicit information from them or try to recruit them as their agent, or set up a SIGINT team nearby to spy on their communications or bug their room, their devices, and so on. That's called close access technical operations in the spy world. Once again, both of those are surprisingly common practices even to this day. Those were the early days of the so-called Web 2.0, and as GCHQ said in this slide, this allowed them to deliver messages and multimedia content across Web 2.0, crafting messaging campaigns to go viral. And it uses Twitter as a SIGDEV example to demonstrate a use case for TDI development. We have a Twitter login server that receives packets that look like this, which authenticate users. GCHQ could capture those and put them in a database to be able to easily exploit Twitter users, or as they said, need SIGINT coverage across protocols, not necessarily consistent with target SIGDEV priorities. For instance, that Twitter login package required to be base64 and URL decoded to be readable, so they had a SIGDEV need to automate that. And after decoding those intercepted messages, they could apply the packet processing framework across a 10 gigabit environment to parse all of that metadata and store them into the black hole database for future use. And with that, they managed to have millions of Twitter events per day stored in that database. With that SIGDEV in place, we see how they could use it for operational needs now. Here they picked the hypothetical country of Kazakhstan, and then they were able to quickly answer the questions: who are the top Twitter users? Or for a specific individual, are they really in Kazakhstan? Concluding that SIGDEV augments the information operation process to aid targeting and take-up of message. Then GCHQ explained the modern, for 2010, information operations spheres of influence, highlighting how leaflets are relying on too many factors and might not be effective against the target. On the other hand, TV, radio, and the internet are closer to the sphere of influence of any person, but social networks and mobile devices are directly inside the closest sphere of influence of any individual they might want to target. What about mobile information operations? Smartphones were becoming more and more popular in the early 2010s, so GCHQ had developed 50 new TDIs by the end of 2010. On top of that, they also started creating TGIs. Think of that as databases of mobile phones based on where they are from or where they are located. Very recently, we've seen both Israeli spy agencies and Russian spy agencies using a similar capability to message large parts of the population in Gaza and Ukraine respectively. Of course, let us know if you are interested in more details on those operations. Using TGIs, GCHQ could shape CNIOs against specific locations, users with a high degree of cognition. And moving next, remember that intro slide that highlighted the value of psychology? Here's how GCHQ combines cyber with psychology. Stealing the credentials of foreign news agencies and then doing an analysis of their employees' psychological profiles. So instead of this simple model of journalists and reporters collecting their data, doing their work, and producing their output, JTRIG was injecting itself to find out who is doing what, how are they doing their work in the news agency, why are they looking at the stories they are looking, and so on. Then exploit the identified vulnerabilities to make those news agencies change their narrative and start producing output that is favorable to the British government. As the slide notes, this is a social, not technological solution. It's basically a merge of exploiting human psychology through the cyber domain. In other words, the mission of JTRIG. That's already a pretty impressive portfolio of one's top secret capabilities, which nowadays are very common across most spy agencies around the world. But what did GCHQ was working on for the next year, 2011? Since that was cutting-edge tradecraft back then, it was to formalize it so that all analysts can take advantage of it. Think about documentation, training programs, case studies, and so on. So any spy could answer the question, what SIGDEV needs to be done prior to starting an effects operation? Also note the photo on the right is likely from a GCHQ office, potentially JTRIG's office. Next was to join up with the rest of the Five Eyes where possible to do more cyber development for similar capabilities. Then it was likely some contact details that Snowden removed to protect the identity of the individual mentioned. And since internet telephony was slowly rising, JTRIG also wanted to target SIP and voice over IP, both for disruptive and covert influence operations. Finally, but very importantly, come up with strategies on how they could defend if adversarial spy agencies did the same against them. And that was the full spectrum cyber effects presentation that GCHQ did for the rest of the Five Eyes back in 2010 to showcase some of their latest spying capabilities and task for collaboration and further development. We mentioned it several times in this episode, but all of them are exceptionally common today, even for tiny nation-state actors, which, of course, begs the question, what are the cutting-edge spying capabilities of SIGINT leaders like GCHQ in today's era? Just like Switzerland, cyberspace has also become a hotbed of espionage globally, and those spying tools and methodologies are advancing every day, reminding us how nothing's as it seems.